You also reviewed the affidavit of Miss Andy Park,
I did.
and that's the parent of Sydney Park, the young girl who died.
Yes, it was such a tragedy.
I'd like to walk through some instances of comparison between the two parents, all right?
Okay.
In your analysis of this case, you were evaluating Jessie Duran's exposure to violent media, right?
I did evaluate Jessie Duran's diet of violent media, yes.
And you also uncovered how Hayden Duran, the parent, responded to that exposure.
I did find some instances of how Miss Duran responded to the exposure that her child had to some violent video games, specifically exposure to some games that may have been rated over the threshold for Jessie's age.
Some of Jessie Duran's mom's responses included instructing Jessie that the guns in these video games are not real.
I did notice that, however, it seemed inadequate for a parent to allow an M-rated game for an 11-year-old child, and her way of coping with that was to say, it's not real.
I'm sorry, Dr. Sillo, I'm not asking you about the adequacy of Miss Duran's parental supervision. My question is about what you reviewed, all right?
Yeah.
And you know, based on your review, that Hayden Duran told Jessie, real guns can hurt people.
That was a statement.
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, under Rule 705, I'm allowed to go into any underlying fact and data that this expert relied on in coming to his conclusions. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, overruled.
You know that Hayden Duran told her daughter that real guns can hurt people.
I am aware that she warned occasionally about the dangers of firearms.
So you know that that Jessie Duran, yes, was exposed to what you would label violent media, right?
I would indeed label first-person shooter military-type games as very, very violent media.
And just to clarify for us, Dr. Solo, you would have to tell this jury that Andy Park also exposed her child to violent media.
In Andy's statements I read, it seemed that the level of exposure was highly different. However, there was some exposure.
You know that Andy Park played violent video games with her child.
I don't know about Andy playing any violent games with her child. I do know that Miss Duran played very violent games with her child.
Forgive me, you know that Andy Park supervised her child while playing violent video games.
I'm aware that any game that was over a threshold for Sydney or Jessie's age had to be supervised.
I want to talk a little bit more about how the two parents in this case are not all that different. You also evaluated whether or not Hayden Duran properly warned her child about the danger of firearms, right?
I did notice that, yes.
You, as a clinical psychiatrist, deemed that warning insufficient, right?
I did deem that warning, when combined with the exposure to violent media, very insufficient.
That's even with your knowledge that she made multiple attempts to instruct her daughter about the dangers.
I do notice that she did make a few attempts to say, guns are bad, and that was about it.
You also commend Hayden Duran for not owning a gun.
I do. I don't think that presence of firearms in the home is good for children.
And that lack of presence in Hayden Duran's home is commendable in your professional opinion.
I would say the presence of firearms was not just a physical firearm. There was very high violent firearm media in the home of the Durans. But I do commend Ms. Duran for not purchasing a real firearm when having a child in the home.
Thank you, Dr. Solo. However, that wasn't my question. I just want to know, based on your professional opinion, whether or not you commend Hayden Duran for her lack of firearm ownership. And you do.
I just said that, yes.
You did uncover in your analysis that Andy Park and Lee Park owned an actual gun, right?
I do know that Andy and Lee did own a gun.
You have to tell the jury that that is not an ideal scenario, right?
No, I don't think families with small children should own guns.
But
you do need to keep that gun safe. If you do, it's your responsibility as a parent to make sure that that gun is locked up in a safe and that the bullets aren't in the safe.
I apologize for interrupting you, but I just want to be sure we're staying on the same page, all right? Right now, I just want to know if Andy Park owned a gun. And if I asked you that question, you'd say yes, right?
Yes, I would.
And when people own a gun with small children in the home, you have identified one method to ensure its safety, right?
Yes.
That one method is to tell your children about the existence of that firearm.
I do feel that when a child reaches a certain age, you should inform them of the firearm being in the home.
Is it your testimony, Dr. Solo, that you differentiate the age of the child on your need to instruct them?
Not in my report, I don't, but in my professional opinion, which I'm here to elaborate on today, I would say that there is an age threshold that the parents should recognize the maturity of their child.
Certainly, if a child is expressing interest in guns, parents ought to warn them of that presence.
Yeah, if a child expresses interest in a gun along with having some violent media exposure, it's a very dangerous cocktail.
That dangerous cocktail was present in the Park home, wasn't it?
I can't say for sure whether or not that whole cocktail that I've identified that was present in the Duran home was fully present in the Park home.
All right, Dr. Solo, then let's take it back and see what goes into this supposed cocktail. You mentioned that exposure to violent media is an essential ingredient of that, right?
Yes, it is.
You know, based on your review of this case, that Sydney Park was exposed to violent media.
I do, but the degree of violent media that is differentiated between Jesse and Sydney is very important.
I understand, Dr. Solo. I'm not talking about degrees, I'm talking about existence. And you know there was an existence of violent media in Sydney Park's home.
A relatively smaller existence, yes.
You believe that Sydney Park's age deemed it worthy to inform her about a presence of a firearm.
I did not say that at all. I did say that it is important for parents to talk about firearms to their children.
At no point did Andy Park ever talk to her daughter about the presence of their firearm.
I don't believe that that is in her statement that she did. However, I was asked to analyze Jesse Duran and not Sydney Park.
I understand, but you read that affidavit in its entirety, I'm sure.
I did.
And to your professional knowledge, at no point did Andy Park ever talk to her daughter about the dangers of firearms.
I'm unaware if she did or not. I can't really tell you what she did.
To your knowledge, she did not.
To my knowledge, it's not contained in her statement pertaining to this case.
Thank you, Dr. Silva. Nothing further.
Any redirect, Counsel?
No redirect, Your Honor. May the witness step down?
That'll be fine, yes. And do we have any further evidence from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor. Plaintiffs rest their case in chief and ask for a brief recess.
That'll be fine. Yeah, take 5 or 6 minutes.
Yes, Your Honor.